In this video, we're going to talk about the health effects of caffeine, whether those are actually good or bad. What's up guys, my name is Jahangir Kareem and I'm a first year pre-medical student at Texas A&M University, and in this video I really want to look into caffeine, whether it's actually good or bad for us, because I know in mainstream media a lot of people demonize caffeine, citing the side effects, whatnot. So I really want to look into whether caffeine is actually beneficial for us or whether it's something that we should completely avoid. Now, I first want to start by talking about coffee, because we all know that coffee is one of, if not the most consumed beverages that contains caffeine. Now, coffee was hypothesized to be found in Ethiopia, which is the Horn of Africa. And with the finding of coffee, this led to pretty much the spread of a new beverage. And with this spread of a new beverage, there were things called coffee houses that were built. And these coffee houses, pretty much as the name says, these houses contained coffee where many people would gather around, either have a conversation over a cup of joe, and many people hypothesize that with the growth of coffee houses around present-day Istanbul, around the Mediterranean, around the Africa where Egypt is, spanning all the way to Turkey, present-day Turkey, whatnot, and going all the way to even England, these growth of coffee houses led to this spread of scientific knowledge, historic knowledge, pretty much knowledge in general. Now, even today, coffee is one of the most consumed beverages that contains caffeine, which is following tea, energy drinks, and even caffeine pills. Now, according to the National Coffee Association, in 2020, over 60% of Americans drink coffee every day. Now, with this high amount of coffee and caffeine in general, how does that affect our body? Now, many of us know the effects of caffeine. It promotes wakefulness and alertness, and through this, it does this by blocking adenosine. Now, in the body and in the nervous system, we have these receptors called adenosine receptors, and it binds to a molecule known as adenosine. And when adenosine binds to the adenosine receptors, this pretty much invokes a feeling of tiredness, sleepiness, and this binding of adenosine to the adenosine receptors allows us to fall asleep. Now, what caffeine does is caffeine is an antagonist to adenosine, and it pretty much has the same shape as adenosine, so it could fit in that receptor much easily. And when that occurs, this promotes wakefulness because adenosine cannot bind to the adenosine receptor, and caffeine binds to the adenosine receptor, which promotes a feeling of wakefulness and alertness. And this is why when we drink a cup of joe, or we have an energy drink, or even some black tea, this promotes wakefulness. We're more alert, we're more awake, especially early in the morning. If you have your coffee, you feel more alert and awake, and it's because caffeine is binding to those adenosine receptors, preventing adenosine from binding to the receptors to promote tiredness. So caffeine is an antagonist, and it replicates the shape of adenosine, so it binds to that receptor, and this results in that wakefulness and alertness that you feel from drinking coffee or consuming any beverage that contains caffeine. Now, there are other things caffeine does as well. Caffeine promotes the secretion of dopamine. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter that's also known as the pleasure neurotransmitter. And this is why when we drink coffee or some latte, maybe Starbucks or something, we get a feeling of happiness, a feeling of pleasure. And it's because of caffeine, because caffeine promotes the secretion of dopamine. Now, like I said, coffee is the most consumed beverage that contains caffeine. So anytime I'm referring to caffeine or coffee, I'm going to use those interchangeably, because coffee, like I said, is the most consumed beverage that contains caffeine, so it's pretty much interchangeable. So now, as in terms of human health, I really want to talk about mortality. And there have been many studies showing that higher consumption of coffee has been associated with decreased mortality in men and women. Now, there was a UK biobank study which investigated the coffee intake of close to 400,000 individuals, and it was collected between 2006 and 2010, which the overall disease-specific mortality was followed throughout 2020 as well. And they found that high levels of coffee intake, which was about more than 4 cups a day, was inversely associated with mortality from 30 to 31 diseases. Now, in the cardiovascular realm, the biobank study found that there's a strong correlation between decreased mortality and cardiometabolic diseases with a high consumption of coffee. Now, the thing is, with a lot of cardiovascular papers and caffeine, it's been pretty variable, because some studies have actually found that the increased consumption of coffee results in a higher risk of coronary heart disease, and some found a decrease. So it's really variable in the cardiovascular realm. Now, in the neurological diseases realm, it's been found that coffee and caffeine in general decreases the risks of Alzheimer's disease and some other forms of dementia, as well as Parkinson's disease. And the Parkinson's disease part really makes sense, because many Parkinson's patients have low levels of dopamine, and caffeine increases those levels of dopamine. There have also been meta-analyses showing that coffee can reduce the risk of stroke. Now, it's also been found that higher consumption of coffee is correlated to a decreased risk of metabolic disease and diabetes. Now, there's an analysis on plasma biomarkers in non-drinkers of coffee and individuals consuming over 4 cups a day, and it was showed that changes in biomarkers were pretty much favorable for the individuals that consumed those 4 cups a day, or even more than 4 cups a day. Now, the group that had the increased coffee consumption also experienced lower levels of those inflammatory biomarkers, such as interleukin 6 and C-reactive protein. Now, here's where things kind of get tricky, because with coffee and cancer, it's pretty much variable with many of the studies. For example, with liver cancer, some studies have shown that there is no association between high consumption of coffee and any sort of risk, or any sort of lowering the risk of liver cancer, while some studies have. And it's pretty much a back and forth with many of the coffee studies that have looked into cancer. Either they found that there is no association, or there is a decrease. But all in all, it's pretty much variable with the studies of coffee and cancer. Caffeine also helps with neuroconnectivity between different neurons, and this helps with neuroplasticity. Now, with a drug like caffeine, or a stimulant like caffeine, although there are so many benefits, it also comes with side effects. And these side effects usually include anxiety, jitters, not being able to sleep properly, as well as some other side effects. But the thing is, the only way you could develop these side effects is by ingesting too much caffeine, because dosage is the poison. Now, the recommended limit for caffeine consumption is usually 400 milligrams, so under 400 milligrams is recommended, but this really depends on person to person, because some people can metabolize caffeine very quickly, not experience the side effects, and be able to sleep like a baby, while some people, if they have just one drink of coffee in the morning, they'll not be able to sleep. So this really depends on you, but it is recommended to stay under 400 milligrams. Now, one thing that can develop with the increased consumption of coffee or caffeine in general is tolerance. And what tolerance basically is that, let's just say on day one you just had a cup of coffee and you keep doing that frequently, but then you notice by week 2 or week 3 you're still sleepy or still tired even though you had your coffee, so you increase the amount to 2 cups so you can get that stimulation, so you could feel more wakeful and alert. And the next 2 or 3 weeks go by and 2 cups aren't enough, then 3 cups, 4 cups, and this pretty much builds up until you suddenly withdraw and you just go cold turkey. And this is when you can experience those terrible side effects, like terrible headache, always being tired, lethargic, not being able to sleep properly. So that's one of the things that should be avoided when ingesting caffeine is that you don't want to build tolerance, and cycling caffeine is a really good protocol to follow. But like I've said before with many of the videos, this is educational only. I'm not giving medical information. Although I am wearing scrubs, I have a lot of years to go by to actually become a doctor. I have a long journey ahead of me, so this isn't medical advice at all. This is only educational. But that's pretty much what's recommended, under 400 milligrams, so you don't experience the side effects. Now, one of the things that I've seen in mainstream media is this demonization of caffeine and coffee, where many people will cite all their problems to ingesting coffee or caffeine in general, where some people will just cut off caffeine and have the belief that it just cleansed them, and for some people that may be true, but that's pretty much anecdotal, because with science and with a human body, it's very difficult to pinpoint one factor that has maybe caused bad sleep or any sort of symptoms that you may be feeling. So one of the things that I've seen in mainstream media is this push of mushroom coffee, and there's many companies that have done this. I don't want to cite any of them. I don't want to cause any conflict or anything like that. But just mushroom coffee in general, where they have taken advantage of this demonization of coffee and caffeine, where many people have started to believe that coffee and caffeine is the reason why they may be lethargic, have brain fog, not have enough energy. And those are some of the symptoms that many people have. And many companies, many supplement companies, take advantage of that. And sometime in the future, I'd love to make a documentary series on the supplement and nutrition industry. But they're really smart because they have used marketing. They haven't used scientific research to back up their claims. And they're really good at marketing. So with supplements in general, I always like to say that it's just the icing on the cake, because the three things you really need to focus on is your nutrition, your sleep, and exercise, because those three things will increase your longevity by a staggering amount, by a significant amount. And many people believe that taking supplements will solve all their problems, instead of realizing that it's the nutrition, the sleep, and the exercise that are the three most important pretty much pillars of a healthy lifestyle. Now, all in all, coffee is indeed a health food, and caffeine is something that you may want to look into putting into your day-to-day life. Now, some people may have a bad reaction to caffeine and coffee, and that's totally fine, because it really depends on you. You want to personalize all of your supplements, your nutrition, your lifestyle to yourself, because there is no one diet that pretty much everyone can follow. There's no one exercise that's optimal for everyone. There is no supplement that's optimal for everyone, because it really depends on you. This is all personalized for you. Your health lifestyle should be personalized to you and not to everyone else, because something that's optimal to one person may not be optimal to you. So I really encourage you guys to investigate caffeine. Maybe just drink coffee in the morning, see how that affects you, see if you actually have a boost in cognition, or you feel more alert, awake, anything like that, because the scientific research has shown that coffee and caffeine in general is indeed a health food. And unfortunately, that wraps up our episode on caffeine and its health effects. And as always, a Pomodoro a day will make you a doctor someday. I'll see you guys in the next one.